Hi, I'm Tori, and today I'm going to be discussing The Chemist by Stephenie Meyer. This book was published in 2016, and it is her first attempt at a thriller instead of the more fantasy science fiction stuff that she usually writes. So I first read Twilight when I was 15, and the books and movies were just becoming incredibly popular, and I have very fond memories of that time. I loved it that it was a book that I could actually get my friends to read and talk about with me, and I've always had a soft spot for Stephenie Meyer books. I love reading them when I want just a cozy, fun romance novel. So this was her first book that was marketed as adult instead of young adult, and the writing style is almost identical. The only difference I could really tell is that this book has a lot more bloody and violent scenes in it. It follows the story of a 20-something woman who used to work for a top-secret government agency, but ran away when her coworkers started dying. And if you're used to reading thrillers, this might take a few chapters to get into. I've read a lot of really good thrillers with very smart characters who are good at thinking on their feet and staying ahead of the people who are trying to kill them. And this book wants to be that, but I feel like its execution is not the best. It tells you over and over again how smart our main character is, but I didn't think that most of the decisions she made were particularly smart, or most of the things she did were very clever. And so the first couple chapters of this book, where it is just a thriller, are a little bit hard to get through. But very soon we are introduced to the romance element of the story, and that is where Stephenie Meyer shines. And then at that point I could just kind of let the thriller espionage elements of the story act as sort of a background and not think about them too hard, and just focus on the romance. So if you want to read a cozy Stephenie Meyer romance with a thriller backdrop, go read this book, then come back and hear what I have to say about it. So I enjoyed this book, but I did have a harder time with the thriller elements of the plot than with anything else. The book wants you to believe that the main character is incredibly smart and that she's been able to outwit this government agency for ages, and she just thinks of the best plans and she's the most clever person in the world. And she just didn't seem that smart to me. The weapons that she chose to use were definitely very creative, and this was not like any other thriller that I've ever read, but I had a hard time believing that they would actually work. Pretty much all of her weapons centered around poisonous gas, and she had this complicated sleeping ritual every night where she would set up a dummy of herself and then go sleep in the bathtub. And that seems like the kind of thing that would only work under very specific circumstances, and especially because the people chasing her knew that she was great at chemical warfare, it seems a little unbelievable to me that they would just waltz into her house without gas masks and happily breathe in her poisonous gas and not just shoot or bomb her house from the outside. Her survival plan also only works if she has a lone assassin, or if all the assassins come in at the same time. If there was backup outside and they noticed that the first person who went in didn't make it back out, then she would have been dead. And it was definitely very unique to see all of her poisonous gas weapons and then all of Kevin's attacking with dogs. And it made the story very different, and it was definitely an interesting approach, but I felt like they could have both been defeated very easily. The reason that attack dogs are only used in certain circumstances is because it's hard to keep them alive. It's hard to transport them. They're just kind of impractical. And poisonous gas only works in certain situations, and if you know enough about your target to just wear a gas mask, then you're basically safe, especially according to the logic of this book. I also thought it was really interesting that this book made the assumption that torture always works. If you can create the right chemical compounds that will cause someone enough pain and make them miserable enough, they will crack and tell you the truth. And there was no question of if someone in horrible pain would lie or make up something that they thought their torturer wanted to hear. There was no question of any of that. And I didn't present it like she had truth serums that would force someone to always speak truly. It was just that she was excellent at causing pain, and that pain always made people tell the truth, and the story never questioned that logic. I also thought that their victory at the end of the book was way too easy. The basic premise was that there were only a few people in these government agencies who wanted to kill the main character and Kevin. And once they were able to kill these people, they were completely fine, because these people hadn't made any reports. Everything they did was illegal and hidden, and so they managed to kill off a handful of people, and then they were free to go about their lives and never be hunted again. And that just doesn't seem like the way a shadowy government torture agency would work. Stephenie Meyer did manage to surprise me, though. There was that moment when Daniel had been shot and the story was telling us that he was definitely dead. And at first I was thinking, oh, this is a Stephenie Meyer novel and he is the main love interest, there's no way he'll die. But then I was thinking, this is an adult book, she's trying something different. And there was this whole romantic connection between the main character and Kevin. So I almost believed for a minute that Daniel would die and the main character and Kevin would run off into the sunset. But it is still Stephenie Meyer, so it turns out that Daniel was fine, and all three of them ran off into the sunset together. I did think that their relationship dynamic was very interesting, because if the story had just been about the main character and Daniel, it would have been pretty boring. He was just such a generically sweet, lovable, supportive guy that their story wasn't all that interesting and he didn't have that much personality. And in the past, Stephenie Meyer has done lots of things with love triangles. She is very famous for her Edward Jacob Bella love triangle, and even the host had like a love quadrangle that involved 4 people in 3 bodies. And this one was interesting because on the page it was never stated that the main character and Kevin were dating or had any interest in dating each other, but they had so much more chemistry than the main character and Daniel did. And they spent the whole time bantering and flirting, and it did almost feel like the main character was dating both brothers. She had Daniel to be the supportive, cuddly one, and Kevin to be the fun, bickery, bantery one. And so that was a very interesting dynamic. So I had fun with this story. I enjoyed getting lost in the romance and suspense of it, and while everything in it wasn't 100% believable, I will definitely give Stephenie Meyer points for creativity, and I thought this was a fun book.